Okay, so what do you think? Why do we need to estimate cost? Why do we need to estimate cost?
Plans.
Plans.
First, what we are going to estimate. The work that we are going to estimate.
Okay, so that's what do we need to estimate to do the estimate? But the question is, why do we need to estimate cost in the first place?
No, how much the project will
How
cost.
much?
You want to know how much it's going to cost, some work, right? Or something, some service. Why do you want to know that?
So we can have a budget.
So you can have a budget if you want to make it yourself, right? If you're the owner.
So you know how much to charge.
You know how much to charge. If you're a contractor, right? You want to charge the owner for certain work. You know, you need to know how much it's going to cost you, so you know how much you're going to charge.
To know the labor.
To know how many resources you need, labor, materials, equipment. You know how many subcontractors, how many people you need, and so on. Very good. Why can't we just build whatever it is and then sum up all the costs?
What if the owner don't have that much money when you end up?
It's not feasible, right? You can't just build something to figure out how much it's going to cost. You need to use a better technique, right? Very good. What is the difference between price, cost, and profit?
Cost is what it costs you to buy the stuff. Price, I'm assuming, go back. Price is the cost. Simple.
Price is what you sell it for,
Oh,
and then the profit is the difference. Hopefully positive, right?
Yes.
So what happened here is you're buying something at certain cost, you're selling it at a certain price, right? And the difference is with your profit, and you want that to be positive so you make money.
Exactly.
Sometimes it's not the case, right? Why not?
Because you mess up the budget.
Right, because you didn't figure this on correctly.
Uh-huh.
So because you didn't have this one right, you couldn't set up this one correctly. And then you end up losing money. We don't want to do that, right? We don't want to do that. So we're going to try to find out ways to estimate this cost in the most accurate way that we can. All right, that's what we'll try to do in this course. What's an estimate?
A projection.
A projection, okay.
Projection of expenses.
What else?
It's an approximation.
An approximation, very good. It's a best guess, right? It's your best guess of what something is going to cost. It's not the real deal. You're not finding the real number. If it is a cost estimate, you're not finding the real cost. If it is a measure estimate, you're not finding the exact measure. You're estimating what that is. So what's the difference between the real and the estimate?
You can only do the real when the project is done.
You only get the real when the project is done. That's absolutely true. Yes. Why? Why is that? Why can't you get the real one when you?
Because during the project, things might happen, unforeseen circumstances.
Exactly. Things may happen that change what you have conceived about that final project, right? Maybe you thought, well, I'm doing a building with bricks, and now it's not. It's a tilt-up. It's different. So the conditions that you had in your mind when you envisioned the final product are different from the one that actually happened on the job site, right? Sometimes the difference is not as big as I just said. Sometimes it's a small difference. But the small difference over a large number of quantities becomes a large number. So that's why we don't always have the exact real value when we estimate. We get just the best guess on what the cost is when we do the estimate. All right, so who does the estimation? There's an obvious answer to that. There's a not so, the estimator, yeah, that's the obvious answer. Now, there's more than that. Who else does an estimate?
Subcontractors.
The subcontractor does an estimate, yeah. The owner makes an estimate, right? Everybody, in their own way, do an estimate, right? Everybody goes through that process of doing an estimate. Why? Why is that the case? Why does the owner make some?
See if he has enough funds to do the project.
That's one reason, right? If you're going to embark in this project, you want to know how much that's going to cost, so you make your own estimate. What else?
Not to find the resources.
Find the resources, how much you
Estimate,
need. Yeah.
request for credits or whatever.
Very good. What else?
Make sure he's not overpriced.
Exactly, to compare when he received estimate from the subcontractors or the different trades, he can compare and see, well, you know, is this in line with what I had in mind, right? So it helps you in two different ways. One is to get the scope right, right? You are able to say, well, you know, this is not what I asked you. The numbers do not match what I had, so there's got to be some mismatch in between what I ask you to give me and what you're giving me. So the scope of work gets aligned somehow when you compare estimates. And the other aspect of it is the monetary resources that you need and the labor, equipment, and subcontractors that you need to know how much it's going to be to get this project going. Then how do we make an estimate?
Materials, costs,
Yeah, we need materials, we need cost,
units.
unit prices.
I mean, find out what the person wants while are you building first.
Okay, very good. So you define the scope of work. That's the first step, right? Define the scope of work. Then,
Find out what it's going to take. What
exactly.
to build.
Then you do measurements to find out how much materials you need, how many people you need, and so on. So you do the resources in terms of materials, equipment, people, and so on. What else? It's just one more component that we need to put into that equation.
Then you find out the price.
The price, right, the cost for each one of those elements, the unit cost. How much are you going to pay per hour to that worker that's going to take the materials and convert them into a final product? How much are you going to pay for that material per ton, per linear feet, per square foot, per whatever dimension it is, multiplied by how much of that you need to get your final cost, right? So you add together all those numbers and you get your final estimate in how much that's going to cost. Adding, you know, administrative stuff and indirect costs to that figure, you get the total cost. All right, so when we have the estimate, what do we do with that estimate?
To get to the owner of the project.
Right, you figure out the cost, right? The price that you want to charge, you give it to the owner. What else? Is that the only reason why? The only use of that estimate?
To find out if you're on budget or over budget.
Very good. So you start doing the work and you start comparing what you're spending versus what you have estimated. So then you can see if you're under budget, over budget, you know, how's it's a control measure, right? How is that project going on in time compared to what you have estimated before, right? So you use it as a control mechanism. What else?
If you have a estimate that corresponds well with the actual project cost, you know that you can use that estimate for future
Excellent.
similar projects.
Very good. Excellent. To create new estimates in the future. You can go back, look at the structure of the estimate to begin with. Okay, this is what I did before, so I may want to do something similar. You can look at the numbers, right, and say, well, if I paid before this much for that, how much is this new thing going to cost me? So you can compare what you have done before versus what you need to do to estimate the cost. You may adjust for different sizes. You may adjust for different times. So if you did this 10 years ago, how much is that going to cost today? But you can use it as a cost reference for your own new projects. Very good. Excellent. So that's basically, you know, the estimate. The why do we do it? How do we do it? What do we do with the estimate? So we want to do an estimate to make sure that we understand the resources that we need and use them in the most productive way. It's a really great tool for discussing scope of work, times, to create a schedule also, because you know the resources that you need. You figure out the sequence in which you need to come in with those resources in terms of materials, labor, and equipment. When do you need them? How are you going to build this building? So you get a really good sense of what you're going to do and how much it's going to cost. If the prices are too low, what may happen? If your estimate is too low, what happens?
You lose money.
You lose money, right? Absolutely. If the estimate is too high, what happens?
You don't get the project.
You don't get the project, you lose money too, right? So you gotta get that estimate just right, or you're in trouble. So I consider the estimate to be one of the most important parts of your business. You need to really get this correct. There are some definitions that we'll work with as we go into the course. Life cycle, how long the project takes and what are the different stages for the life cycle. The project goes from conception all the way to decommissioning, and we may not have to be involved or estimate all of those phases. We may need to only go from conception to construction, and then the portion of operating may be up to the owner, and decommissioning may be up to the owner or the next owner. So the concept of life cycle depends on where you are in the section of that life cycle. The cost, estimation, time, materials, and work, we pretty much are familiar with those. Then it comes with the work breakdown structure and the work element. Is anyone here familiar with what a work breakdown structure is? No. The work breakdown structure is like a hierarchy. You know the hierarchy that you have for the office work. You have the president, and then you have vice presidents, and then you have directors, and then you have engineers, accountants, and so on. And you go and you break down this structure of people in different elements, right? You may go and group them by divisions or by trades or groups or however the company breaks down. Same thing is with the cost estimate. You can take a product, a building that you're making, or a service that you're going to provide, or any final product that you want to estimate, and break that down into different smaller elements. When you put together all these elements, you get the bigger, you get your final product. So you break these down into smaller elements in order to simplify the process of estimating those elements. So the idea is that if you can take one project and break it down into smaller components, you can estimate the cost of those smaller components. When you add all the components together, you get the final product. When you add all the estimates together, you get the final estimate. So it's a way to break down the big project into smaller chunks and be able to work with them. Deliverables are items in that work breakdown structure that you're going to deliver to the customer or the owner. That final product can be a product, a process, project, a service, it could be anything. It could be a building, it could be a company that you're making to provide a service to someone else. It could be a large project, could be a service that you're going to do, anything. So the concept of work breakdown structure and cost estimate is very general and can be applied to almost anything. You can think in your own personal life. You want to move from Chicago to Miami. You need to have an idea of, okay, how much is that going to cost? Where am I going to live? How much am I going to pay? All of those items, it's cost. And you're estimating cost, either in your head or by writing it down on a piece of paper and figure out, how much you need to get from here to where you want to. Same thing is with this. And the only difference for this particular course is that we are going to narrow our scope of work to construction projects. So we're going to look into, okay, if we have a construction project, how is that different from anything else? And what I need to know to estimate a construction project. Concrete, steel, insulations, paint, finishes, whatever it is, how to estimate those items. But the broad concept of estimating can be applied to anything. Okay, so we looked at the estimating and we said, okay, an estimate is the best judgment, it's the best guess. It's not the real cost, but it's the most accurate number that I can come up with right now, given the information that I have. So the objective is to prepare an approximate realistic cost of a project in an efficient way, in an orderly way, in a comprehensive manner. One of the most important aspects of what I will teach you in this course is not only the concept of how to do an estimate, but how to do it in such way that you can modify it easily, that you will be able to know where that cost comes from. And if somebody challenges you, well, how come you have this amount of money in paint? That doesn't make sense. You will be able to drill down and say, well, I figured this many square feet. I figured that each can of paints this much, so I need this number of cans, and then I need this many people to take that paint and put it on the walls. That's how I found the cost for this paint. So you will be able to explain how did you get to that number. And if somebody says, well, that number is ridiculous, then you can say, well, we can do a couple of things. We can reduce the cost of the paint, right? Maybe we use a cheaper paint, but then your final product may not look as good as I have it envisioned in my mind. Or we can use lower labor rates, right? Or less people, it will take longer. I mean, you have the tools to answer and challenge any question that they will be asking you about that paint. The other important aspect of doing it the way that I'm going to teach you is that when you go back to that estimate 5 years from now, you should be able to look at it and figure out what did you do to get to that number, right? If you write down the number on a napkin, man, it's going to be really tough to go back and figure out how did you get that number off. But if you're able to structure that in sequence, in ways that shows you, okay, this is how many square feet you have, this is how much paint you need per square feet, this is how many cans you need, this is how much each one of those costs, this is how many people you need, this is your total cost, you will be able to use that again in the future, just change the numbers, and you will be golden. So that's why I want to show you and try to force you a little bit into using the estimate in the way that I have it set up. So for the future, you can get back to it and get it done. Estimating by some people is the art of building on paper what you will later on build in real life, right? So you will do an estimate in materials and equipment and people. You need information. You need drawings, you need to know, you were talking about before, and that you want to do design build, right? Yes. You're saying that. So it also, the type of contract that you do with the owner will change a little bit. How do you do your estimate? How do you present your estimate? There are different type of contracts. Is anyone familiar with this? You want to explain a little bit what you want to do? You want to do design build? Can you tell us a little bit what design build is?
A delivery method where you provide both design services for the client, and rather than the more conventional method where you'll have an architect or engineer design something and then you put it out to build, you design it, and you also give a price that you then use to actually build it yourself.
Very good. So in this design build type of contract, the owner is going to hire a company to design a building or a final product, and also to build that. Right? That's one type of contract, but that's not the only way to do that. We have design, bid, build. So in this case, the owner contracts a architect company, right? They do the design. Based on that design, they go out to the different contractors and they bid on that design. And then the owner decides which one is going to be chosen to do the actual building, right? So you can have different contracts for different trades. You may have the architect or an owner's rep doing the administration process to build that building based on the bids that were received, which are then based on the design by the architect's firm. Then we have another concept, which is design, negotiate, bid. This is a little bit different from the design, bid, build, in the sense that now it's not open to bidding for everybody. It's basically a negotiation between the owner and normally one contractor that has a specialized knowledge in the building they're doing. So because it's only one person that can do that job, or one company that the owner wants to hire for whatever reason, maybe because successful negotiations in the past, then they negotiate the price. That's a little bit different from design, bid, build. You see the difference here?
Okay, no. In the first one, when you design, you create a bid, and everybody can
bid on that
on
project.
that one.
Yes.
And the second one, who is the one that negotiates?
Yes.
Who is the one?
The owner and the person who's going to build the building. Let's say, for example, I am an owner and I want to build, this school. Okay, and this is not the first school that I built. I built 10 before, and on the first one, I decided to open bid for everybody. So I asked her to do the design, and then I came and I said, okay, this is the design. I give it to several contractors and asked, okay, how much are you guys gonna charge me? So I chose one of these contractors. Okay, that person does the first building. And I was so happy that I decided to work with that contractor in all the rest of my buildings. So when I get a different design, I go to that contractor and say, okay, let's negotiate how much you're going to charge me for this.
Okay.
Because I like working with you. That's one scenario. Another scenario is, I wanted to build a platform to send rockets to the moon. How many people do platforms to send rockets? Maybe one, maybe two. So then you have to negotiate with the person who's an expert in that to see how much you're going to pay, right? That's another feature where you negotiate your price because you have a very small, only one perhaps, pool of potential people that will do the job. Then we have the design build, then we have the construction management where we have an entity that manages this process. Could be the managing of the actual building. They could come in with the design portion of it. I mean, there's different variations to that. There is the owner build, when the owner has enough experience to manage the whole process himself, so he will do the building itself. And then there is integrated project delivery, where everybody works as a team, and now you include systems like the building information modeling, the Revit, and all that stuff to build the building conceptually before it actually gets done, so you minimize clashes and get a more smooth process in the construction phase, and then you move all the craziness to the design phase. So that's kind of the different type of contracts, and they affect the way that you prepare your estimate, because the cost has to do, the price that you charge has to do a lot with the risk that you're taking. So different contracts have different levels of risk for the contractor. So you may want to adjust that price depending on what contract you have.
For the owner's build, does the owner design and build or just build, not design?
It could be either case. For example, my family has a construction firm in Venezuela, and we have one of the partners is an architect. So he does the design, and we build it. We just go and we buy land, and then we hire contractors. Although we also have our own force. We have, equipment. We have operators. So we do the whole thing. It could be that the owner acts as a manager. So he would hire all the contractors to do the work.
Okay.
But he has enough knowledge to manage that process, including the design aspect of it. Okay? So then it doesn't go out as it's not managed by the design firm, which is normally the case. Okay? All right, so this is the life cycle for a construction project. We start with the planning and pre-design of the building or the concept that the owner wants to get done. It starts with the conceptual phase, right? What the owner wants to do. Is that a school? Is that a platform to ship to launch rockets? What it is. And then based on the experience of the owner, their capacity, the size of the project, they will decide what type of a delivery system they prefer. So then they will go with the design build, or whatever contract they want to proceed. And then they go into the design phase. They go and say, okay, let's design this a little bit. Let's put the concept more into paper, and then it becomes a level where you have more documentation, right? At the beginning, you only have that conceptual idea. So it's difficult to put a number on a concept, right? That's why at the beginning, we create what's called a screening estimate. These are estimates that are based on price per square feet of other projects that have been done before. So you get an idea about how much you are going to spend this thing without knowing exactly, how much it's going to cost. So as you move down to the design, you may start with preliminary design. You may have some schematics. So you create a more accurate estimate, right? You move from the screening estimate to a preliminary or budget cost estimate. As the design moves forward and you get the final design, you get the drawings and specifications for construction, you create a budget and schedule tied to that construction process, so you get a definite cost estimate. That's when you have all your drawings, all your specifications, you know exactly what the owner wants, and then you base your estimate on that. That's sort of the type of estimate that we're going to do in this course. We have final drawings for construction, and we're going to base our estimate on that. Then it comes into procurement. After everything is said and done, and you go and you negotiate and purchase the materials, equipment, and contractors that you need to get that project done. Then you move into the construction phase. When you go into the construction phase, then you have mobilization, you have temporary utilities, you have to secure the site, you have to provide protection for the general public, for the materials that you have over there. All of these are costs associated that you need to spend to get that project going, But then you're going to take that away later when you're finished, right? All your temporary fences, the temporary utilities, all of that's going to be gone, and you will replace that with final utilities that come into the building. So you have associated with this some costs that you are not going to give for materials and stuff that you're not going to give the owner. So most of those can be associated with indirect costs that you need to spend in order to do the building, but you're not providing to the owner. Then you have to prepare the ground, look for underground utilities, place foundations, do the steel frame, close the structure, build interior spaces. That's sort of the big items that you need to go through to build something. And what we have to do is we have to estimate the cost with each one of these items to figure out how much the total cost is going to be. So that's our first breakdown, right? We take a construction project and we break it down into phases. Mobilization, temporary utilities, the ground, underground utilities, foundation, the structure, the enclosing the building, and then interior spaces. That's kind of in big pictures how we start breaking down that large project into pieces that are easier to handle. Then we have the post-construction. It comes in, the owner takes occupancy of the building, then the building now goes to facilities management. There is a transition and a closeout, then the owner takes over and moves forward. So that's for us the construction life cycle. Here on it will be operation, and then later will be decommissioning. We're not going to get into that portion of the life cycle for the project. So this is where we're interested to do our cost. The tricky part is that from the conception point, we're asked to prepare an estimate. How do you prepare an estimate when you don't have enough information? Stuff, right?
Just using the one that you did before.
Use square feet cost, use what you did before, your best guess, and then move forward as you get more information to do a more accurate estimate. So in the life cycle of the project, what happens is we start with very high uncertainty. We don't know exactly what the owner wants. And that's when we need to create the first estimate, the screening estimate. As we move down in time, the conceptual phase goes down into preliminary engineering, which goes down then into detailed engineering, which goes down then into construction. And as we move down into this life cycle to a more detailed construction data, we reduce the uncertainty and we make better and more accurate estimates. So the process of estimating has also its own life cycle. We start with a request for quotation. RFQ is a request for quotation. The owner asks us, okay, we need a cost on this thing. We collect how much data we can from the owner. We put down the ground rules, which is basically all the assumptions that we're taking to prepare that estimate. Do we have enough labor available? Is that labor skilled labor? Do we have sources of materials? Do we have suppliers in the area? How far away is that from our office? We start collecting all this information to assemble the estimate. So then we need a team of people, get the tools for the course project. The tools will be the software that we're going to use, familiarize with the scope of work, and then do the estimate. Review to make sure that we have that correct. Reconcile that with the current, trades and cost in the market. We can have one estimate done exactly the same as one 5 years ago, and the prices will be completely different because there are marketing factors that affect the cost. The quantities may be the exact same ones, but then the cost of going and transform those materials into the real project will be different. Pricing and publication, and then the use of the estimate, as we have seen before. We've talked about the different uses of the estimate. Control is the owner budget. We talked about these. We talked about who does the estimate. These are some of the characteristics that we want to have for our cost estimate. We want it to be credible, supportable. Where does that cost come from? Where do you find that number? Useful, accurate, achievable, competitive, realistic, organized. Organized is very important. Available on time. It doesn't help if you come in with an estimate late. Bad estimates tend to have significant overruns, inconsistent results, it has few details, poorly documented. It also depends a lot on the experience of the estimator and the information available at the time. I think we've talked about this already. Types of bids, well, we talked about a little bit about that. The cost options, we have lump sum. This is when we have a one number for the cost of that product or project. We may have unit price, where we set up the cost of different units, and then the owner will decide how many units they need. There could be a cost plus fee way of setting up the contract, where the contractor will say, okay, I'm going to bill you at whatever cost it has, and then I will add a fee to make money on top of whatever cost it has. Or it could be one with a guaranteed maximum price. These cost options will be chosen by the owner with the contractor, depending on how much information there is available for the project and how much risk is the owner willing to take and the contractor willing to take. There could be also bonuses and penalties that may affect the final cost of your project. If you finish early, you may have a bonus, right? Where the owner will say, okay, we'll give you, monetary compensation if you finish early, or penalties if you finish late, right? What's called liquidated damages. You may have a situation where a store is opening and the owner wants to make money by selling stuff in that store. And if you're not done on time for Christmas, for example, that may cost the owner a lot of money, and they want to charge you for not being on time. So you need to consider those options when you're preparing your cost estimate, because that's going to affect how much money you're going to make at the end and the level of risk that you have. You guys want to take a 10-minute break?
Yes.
Yes?
No, I need to go to the restroom.
All right. So we've talked a little bit about uncertainty, and we also mentioned risk. What are risk and uncertainty? What do you think that is? What's risk and uncertainty?
Something that you don't know, of course.
Something you don't know
cannot
becomes uncertain, right? You have uncertainty about the future if you don't know what's going to happen.
And you cannot plan ahead.
You cannot plan ahead. Okay? What else?
Risk is what happens to you if you don't plan appropriately.
Risk is what happens to you if you don't plan accordingly. Okay? What else? What do you think? Can you plan and still be at risk?
Yes.
Yes, right? So even if you plan, you can still be at risk.
But when you plan,
Yes.
you minimize the risk
You can minimize the risk
by planning.
by planning. Yes, very good. You can minimize the risk by planning. Basically, the issue here is that uncertainty is the unknown, right? It's, you don't know what can happen in the future, so that the outcome may be different from what you have expected. So there is a risk associated with having an outcome that is not what you expect. That can cost you money, or that can be benefit to you. You know, if you were expecting the cost of something, of some labor to be X, and it comes out to be lower, that is an unexpected result, but it's a positive result, right? Whereas you can have a negative result that you were not expecting, and that make you lose money. So there is the possibility of a negative or positive uncertain event, right? And risk is the probability or the possibility of that unknown event to occur. Okay, so that's the kind of the relationship between the unknown and an event that will occur in the future. So you are at risk if you don't know what will be the outcome, right? With certainty, and that is true for everything that you do. So some authors say, well, you know, it could be positive, it could be negative. I'm going to define the risk in the case where unfavorable events occur, those that will cost you money, right? So the issue is that things can occur, events can occur that can cost you money, and that the probability of those events occurring is what we call risk. We can minimize the risk of losing money by planning ahead, by trying to uncover those events as much as we can. Some of those may be weather related that we have absolutely no control with, but still we could plan ahead and have a contingency plan that is, if a hurricane comes in, we minimize our losses. So we are still at risk, but we are planning to lower the impact of that unfortunate event or unknown event. So that can, the reason why that it's brought into this course is because you have to think about what can go wrong and how much is that going to cost you. Okay, so when you're planning, you can include some of the money that you need in the future if something goes wrong. So at the beginning of the project, you have not committed any money, you have not placed any purchase orders, you have 100% control of the amount that is going to be spent. As you move into the planning to the detailed engineering or detailed drawings, you start committing money, you know, either to the design companies or to some contractors. You start spending money, and as you start spending money, the influence that you have over the final outcome starts to go down. Okay? Then there is another curve over here, this yellow one, which is the cost of changes. So over time, if you change something on the planning area, the cost is very low. You know, you're planning your stuff, you can change it. The impact of that cost change is not really too much. But as you start moving down into basic detail and into construction, then that cost goes up really high and very fast. And that's something to take into consideration, both from the design point of view and from the owner's point of view. I remember when I was working in a project, and the owner changed. You know, we were already in construction, they changed a small valve. The difference in the cost from one valve to another one was not really too much, but the change order was significant. And the guy asked me, well, you're crazy. Why are you charging me over $5,000 for a change that may be only $500? I said, well, the change in the valves may be only $500, but we already installed 10 of those. And these are pneumatic. The ones that we had before were electrical. So now we need to bring in compressed air. We need to filter the air. We need to take, air lines over there that we didn't have before. So that small change, had you told me over here, no big deal. It wouldn't have cost more than $50. But now, we have to change a whole bunch of things to get that change implemented. So then the cost of the change order goes pretty high. So that's something to take into consideration also. When we do the estimate for the cost, we need to know at what level of design we are, how much information we have, because that's going to affect our accuracy, right? We've talked about these screening estimates that we do at the beginning of the project, where we are in the go or no-go decision. So how do you prepare an estimate when you have very little to go with? You said before, well, you use information from previous projects that you have, right? So that's sort of a proration or an overall application of a previous project to a new one. You can use some curves where you will say, okay, well, the cost that we had before is different from the one we have now, so you apply some changes. You may identify the difference between what you have done before and what you're doing now and apply some cost for that. The square foot estimate is very useful. So basically, you calculate the area or the volume of certain areas, and then you apply a cost per square foot, and then come up with a rough estimate for that area. These costs per square foot can come from books, can come from previous jobs, where you take your estimate and then you divide by the area of the project, and then you get that cost per square foot. That's why in the summary they presented before, you have that value. So you can use that in the future to estimate other projects.